My beloved child, something was said about you when you were not in the room, and the person you love never imagined that those words would somehow find their way back to your heart. Stay with me, because this was not an ordinary conversation, and it did not begin the way you might expect. There was no dramatic announcement, no carefully prepared speech, no moment where everyone suddenly stopped and demanded an answer. It began quietly. Your name entered a conversation almost by accident, yet the instant it was spoken, something shifted inside the person you love. Their expression changed before they could hide it. Their eyes became distant for a second, as though one simple mention of you had opened a door to memories they had been trying to keep closed. The person sitting across from them noticed. They noticed the pause. They noticed the way your person suddenly became careful with every word. And then came the question that changed the entire atmosphere: why do you become different whenever someone mentions them? Your person did not answer immediately. Don't look away now. That silence mattered more than any quick response could have mattered, because there are moments when the heart reveals itself through what the mouth cannot immediately say. They looked away, searching for an answer that would sound ordinary, but nothing about what they felt was ordinary anymore. For a long time they had tried to place you inside a simple category. Someone important. Someone unforgettable. Someone who entered their story and left an impression. But every description seemed too small. And on this particular day, sitting across from someone who could clearly see through their hesitation, those carefully constructed explanations began falling apart. It is complicated, they finally said. But the other person did not accept that answer. No, they replied gently. Complicated is what people say when they don't want to admit something. And that sentence landed deeper than expected. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the most important thing your person said had not yet been spoken. The conversation continued, but underneath every ordinary sentence was a truth pushing closer to the surface. Your person remembered moments involving you that they had never discussed with anyone. Tiny moments. Details that would have seemed meaningless to someone else. The exact way you listened when they were trying to explain something difficult. The calmness they felt after talking with you. The way certain words you once said returned to them on days when they needed encouragement. The strange fact that even after time had passed, ordinary places, songs, evenings, and quiet moments could unexpectedly remind them of you. And suddenly the person across from them asked, "Do you miss them?" Again, silence. This time longer. Your person lowered their eyes. Something inside them had reached the point where pretending became harder than admitting the truth. "More than I should," they whispered. "What comes next changes everything, because that was only the beginning." The other person leaned forward and asked the question your person had avoided asking themselves: "Then why are you acting like they mean less than they actually do?" Those words opened something. Your person tried to explain that there had been uncertainty, timing, misunderstandings, distance, things left unsaid, and moments when they did not know what you were thinking. They spoke about how difficult it had been to understand the connection because you had awakened emotions they were not prepared to examine. They admitted that they had tried distracting themselves. They had tried convincing themselves that enough time would make everything quieter. They had assumed memories would slowly fade into the background. But something unexpected had happened instead. The more they tried to move your memory away, the more clearly they understood what your presence had meant. This is where the story begins, because the person listening suddenly said, "Maybe you're not supposed to forget them." Maybe you're supposed to understand why you remember them. Your person became completely still. It was such a simple sentence, but it struck them like a bell ringing through an empty room. For the first time, they considered the possibility that the persistent memory of you was not something to escape but something to understand. And here is where the spiritual symbolism entered the conversation in a way neither of them expected. Earlier that morning, before your name was ever mentioned, your person had noticed something unusual. A familiar phrase appeared twice in completely different places. Then a song connected to a memory of you surfaced unexpectedly. Later, while searching for something unrelated, they came across an object that reminded them of a conversation the two of you once shared. None of those moments alone meant anything certain, yet together they created a strange emotional pattern. It felt as though life kept gently placing the same unopened letter in front of them, asking, "Are you ready to read this now?" Your person had dismissed those moments. Coincidence, they thought. Memory playing games. Nothing more. But now, sitting in this conversation and hearing someone else speak about you without knowing what had happened earlier that day, they could no longer ignore the emotional weight of it. Your answer is closer than you think. The person across from them asked, when you imagine never speaking to them again, what do you feel? Your person attempted to laugh, but the laugh disappeared almost immediately. Then came another silence. I don't like imagining that, they said. Why? Because it feels unfinished. Those words changed everything. Unfinished. Not forgotten. Not meaningless. Not erased. Unfinished. And there was something else hidden inside that word. Your person had begun realizing that the connection had changed them. Before knowing you, they had certain beliefs about love, trust, timing, vulnerability, and what it meant to truly see another human being. After you, those beliefs were no longer quite the same. You had become a mirror without trying to be one. Something about your presence showed them parts of themselves they had avoided. Their hopes. Their fears. Their tendency to retreat when something mattered too much. Their habit of pretending they were unaffected when their heart was anything but unaffected. Stay with me. The revelation gets deeper. The person listening asked whether you knew any of this. Your person shook their head. Probably not. Why not? Another pause. Because I never said it properly. There it was. The confession beneath every other confession. The person you love had talked about you, but the shocking part was not merely that your name had entered the conversation. The shocking part was how much had been living inside them without reaching you. They admitted they had replayed conversations with you afterward, wondering whether they should have said more. They admitted there were times they nearly reached out and then stopped themselves. They admitted that certain memories had become more meaningful with time rather than less. They even admitted something that surprised the person listening. They understood things about me that I never explained. The listener asked, how? Your person could not fully answer. They remembered moments when you seemed to notice the emotion beneath their words. Moments when you offered kindness without demanding an explanation. Moments when your presence somehow made them feel both exposed and safe, because you appeared to notice more than they intended to reveal while never using that knowledge against them. Don't skip. There is another layer to this. The listener then asked, what do you think they saw in you? Your person smiled faintly, but there was sadness inside that smile. Maybe something I couldn't see in myself yet. That answer surprised even them. They had never spoken it aloud before. And once the words existed outside their thoughts, they could not take them back. Something inside your person was changing in real time. This conversation was no longer about explaining you to someone else. It was becoming a confession to themselves. The person across from them could see it happening. They asked, "And what did you see in them?" Your person looked down again, but this time there was no quick attempt to escape the question. They thought carefully. "Strength," they said. Then after a moment, but not the loud kind. The listener waited. Your person continued. They have this way of carrying things without making everyone else carry them too. They can be quiet, but there's something behind that quietness. They notice people. They remember little things. And somehow, they stopped. Somehow what? The listener asked. Your person took a breath. Somehow they made ordinary moments feel important. Don't look away now. Because what happened next was the moment that transformed this conversation from something emotional into something your person would remember long after it ended. The listener smiled and said, "You realize you haven't described a memory. You've described someone who still matters to you." Your person froze. There was nothing left to argue with. They had been speaking about you in the present tense without realizing it. Not, they were. Not, they used to. They had said, they have. They notice. They remember. Somewhere inside their heart, you had never become entirely past tense. And when they recognized this, their entire expression changed. For one brief moment, everything they had been avoiding stood directly in front of them. They could no longer pretend that the connection existed only inside old memories. Something about you still occupied a living place inside their emotional world. And that was when the listener asked the question your person was least prepared for. If they walked through that door right now, what would you say? Your person looked toward the door instinctively. Nothing happened. Nobody entered. Yet the question itself created an image so vivid that their defenses disappeared. They imagined seeing you unexpectedly. They imagined that first second when neither of you knew what to say. They imagined your eyes meeting theirs. They imagined all the unsaid words standing between you like invisible pages from a book neither of you had finished reading. Your person swallowed and said quietly, "I don't know where I would start." The listener answered, "Start with the truth." And something inside your person knew exactly what that meant. There are conversations that disappear the moment they end, but this one followed your person after they walked away. Stay with me. The biggest revelation did not happen while they were sitting across from that person. It happened later, when they were alone and no longer had anyone to impress, convince, or hide from. The room was quiet. Their phone was nearby. For several minutes they did nothing. They simply sat there thinking about what they had admitted. Your name sounded different inside their mind now because it was attached to truths they could no longer deny. They remembered the question, if they walked through that door right now, what would you say? They began answering it privately. At first the answers were simple. I would ask how they are. I would tell them I've thought about them. I would explain why I became distant. But each answer opened another door. Soon they were remembering the first moment they realized you were not ordinary to them. It was not necessarily some dramatic scene. That was what made it powerful. Perhaps it was a conversation that lasted longer than expected. Perhaps it was the way you remembered something they had casually mentioned days earlier. Perhaps it was the moment they realized they felt unusually calm around you. Whatever the exact moment was, they now understood that something had begun long before they had a name for it. What comes next changes everything. Your person began recognizing a pattern. Whenever the connection felt especially meaningful, they had pulled back. Whenever they felt themselves becoming emotionally visible, they became cautious. Whenever they sensed that you might genuinely matter, they searched for reasons to doubt what they felt. It was easier to question the connection than to question the walls they had built around themselves. And suddenly the conversation from earlier became a mirror. Why do you become different whenever someone mentions them? The answer was now obvious. Because your name touched a part of them they had never fully closed. This is where the story begins. They picked up their phone. For a moment, they considered searching for you, reading an old message, looking at something connected to you, perhaps even writing something. Their fingers hovered, then stopped. They placed the phone down again. Not because they did not care. The opposite was true. They cared enough that every possible action felt significant. And here is the emotional twist they had not expected. Your person was not primarily afraid of rejection. They were afraid that you might still understand them. That possibility was strangely more powerful. Because if you still understood them, if there was still warmth beneath everything that had happened, then they would have to confront the fact that the connection had not disappeared simply because time had moved forward. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Your person stood and walked toward a window. Outside, life continued normally. People moved. Cars passed. Lights changed. Nothing in the world announced that a private realization was unfolding inside one human heart. Yet for them, everything felt slightly altered. They thought about the things they had said about you earlier. Strength. Quietness. Attention. The ability to make ordinary moments important. They wondered whether you knew they saw you that way. They wondered whether you had mistaken their silence for indifference. That thought hurt more than expected. What if they thought I didn't care? They whispered into the empty room. And suddenly another memory surfaced. A moment when you had looked at them as though waiting for something they never gave you. Maybe an explanation. Maybe honesty. Maybe reassurance. Maybe simply a sign that what existed between you mattered to them too. At the time, they had not known how to respond. Now they wished they could return to that moment with the understanding they had today. Your answer is closer than you think, because the person you love was finally beginning to understand that silence communicates something even when silence is not what the heart intends. They had assumed that keeping their feelings private protected everyone involved. Now they wondered whether it had only created confusion. Then something strangely symbolic happened. Their attention was drawn toward an old item nearby, something they had seen many times without thinking about it. It carried no supernatural certainty, no magical promise, yet in that emotional moment it reminded them unmistakably of you. Perhaps it connected to a place, a season, a color, a phrase, or a memory. They picked it up. And with that simple movement, another forgotten scene returned. You were laughing. Or listening. Or saying something they had not understood the importance of at the time. Memory is strange like that. It sometimes protects the meaning of a moment until the heart becomes ready to understand it. Your person sat down again. Their defenses were weakening. Why now, they wondered. Why had your name appeared today? Why had someone asked exactly the questions they had avoided? Why had memories become so vivid? Why did everything seem to point toward the same unfinished emotional chapter? They did not claim to have all the answers. But they could no longer call the pattern meaningless. Stay till the end. Because the once-in-a-lifetime revelation was beginning to form. Your person realized that they had spent so much time asking whether you were meant to remain in their life that they had overlooked a more immediate question. What had knowing you already changed inside them? And when they answered that question, everything became clearer. Knowing you had changed the way they understood emotional honesty. Knowing you had shown them the difference between being noticed and being truly seen. Knowing you had revealed how deeply a quiet connection could affect someone. Even uncertainty had taught them something. Distance had taught them something. Missing you had taught them something. And now talking about you to another person had forced them to hear their own feelings spoken aloud. The mystery was not whether the universe would arrange some perfect scene. The mystery was why, after everything, your name still carried such emotional weight. Don't look away now. Your person returned to their phone. This time they opened a blank message. They stared at the empty space. Then they typed a few words. Deleted them. Typed again. Deleted again. Every sentence sounded either too casual or too intense. Hey, seemed ridiculous compared with everything inside them. A long explanation seemed overwhelming. So they did something unexpected. They stopped trying to write what sounded right and began writing what felt true. I've been thinking about something I should have said a long time ago. They stared at the sentence. Their heartbeat changed. They did not send it. Not yet. But they did not delete it either. And that distinction mattered. For perhaps the first time, they allowed an honest message to exist. Then another line came, you mattered to me more than I knew how to explain. They paused. Those words looked enormous on the screen. They had spent so long containing that truth inside silence that seeing it written felt almost unreal. Another line followed, I don't know what you think of me now, but I hope you never believed you were forgettable. Their eyes remained fixed on the screen. This was no longer a hypothetical answer to someone else's question. This was the beginning of what they genuinely wanted you to know. Stay with me. They continued writing, not knowing whether the message would ever reach you. There are things I remember that you probably don't even know I noticed. And then came the line that made them stop completely, you changed something in me. They read it again. Once. Twice. 3 times. That was the sentence beneath everything. You changed something in me. Not through pressure. Not through dramatic promises. Simply through being present in a way they had not experienced before. Your person placed the phone down and covered their face for a moment. There was relief in finally admitting it, but there was also regret. Why had it taken so long? Why had they needed someone else to mention you before they could finally speak honestly to themselves? Yet perhaps that was precisely why the conversation happened when it did. Sometimes a truth remains invisible until someone asks the one question we have spent years avoiding. The person they had spoken with earlier had done exactly that. And your person could still hear the final advice they had received before leaving. If someone changed your heart, don't reduce them to a memory just because you're afraid of what honesty might require. That sentence now carried extraordinary weight. What comes next changes everything. Your person opened the message again. They did not add anything for several minutes. Then they wrote one final sentence beneath the others. If we ever speak again, I want to be more honest than I was before. They stared at it, and something about those words felt different. They were not demanding anything from you. They were not imagining an outcome.